The scripture today is taken from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verses 1 to 2 and then 7 to 12. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star in the east, and have come to pay him homage." And then Herod secretly called for the Magi, and learned from them the exact time when a star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there, ahead of them, went the star that they had seen in the east, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. May God and blessing to the reading, hearing, and living of these words. Amen.
Thank you, Mary. I know what you're thinking, but don't worry, there's still no score in the Bears game. You haven't missed any. Also, I know what you're thinking, but wait, didn't we just read this story last week? And yeah, kind of, only a slightly different version. Last week we were focusing on the Herod portion, and this week, of course, we're focusing on those three dudes, the wise guys. Right? Our Advent study book that's guiding our worship this Advent is called An Unlikely Advent, by the Reverend Rachel Willis. And it's had us look at some less prominent characters in the story. We started with Zechariah and Elizabeth, a reminder that the God that gets celebrated in this story can make life even in places that we thought were long barren. And then last week we took a look at Herod. Herod the Great, the villain of the story. Man who at once showed great promise and then, delved into being a psychotic murderer. So why spend time with her? Well, maybe to remind us that there are times when each of us plays the role of the villain in someone else's story, and that this love of God is so big that it can overcome even villainy, and we, even when we're the villain, have a role to play in this unfolding story of God's interaction with the world. And so this week, our text asks us to consider those three kings about whom we just sang. Right? And honestly, I realized that over the years, I haven't really thought that much about these guys. I mean, sure, they're always just there, right? And I was aware of them. Like, growing up, we had a nativity set with pretty good-sized figurines that were basically the same size as my superhero dolls, action figures. Actually, let me take a second. Like, of course it's fine if they're dolls. Like, let's stop pretending. And here we are, 2023, can we stop pretending that there's such a thing as boys' toys and girls' toys? It's just toys. It doesn't matter what you like, right? Anyway, so we had this wonderful nativity set that I would kind of play with a little bit, and not with the same rugged abandon that I did those other action figures, but we kind of act out that story. Those wise men, they were there. They were part of that story. I was aware of them. We would sing that song. In fact, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago? Of course, the way things are going lately, if I think something happened 10 years ago, it probably means it was more like 15 or more years ago. Have you had this experience where, why does not do that to us? I don't know. But at least that long ago, I was in the habit of saying that my favorite sort of pop rock Christmas song is that compilation, that amalgamation of God Rest You Merry Gentlemen and We Three Kings that the Bare Naked Ladies recorded with Sarah McLachlan. I love that one. So much so that the band at the previous church learned it and made it part of the repertoire, and every once in a while would just spring it on us. They'd never put it in the order of worship that they were doing, and they'd just start playing, and that was bringing a nice smile to my face, because I love that song. So I was aware of the three kings, right? But I never really thought with any depth about these characters. So this book this week forced me to do so, really. And she calls them, the book, she calls them curious people. And I think that makes sense because really they're surrounded in mystery. They're surrounded in mystery from Jump Street, right? Like, have you noticed? We don't even really know what to call them. The song says kings, but are they kings? I mean, there are some immutable laws of the universe, are there not? And at least one of them is that kings don't stop to ask for directions. And yet that's exactly what these guys do. They stop and ask for directions. So maybe they're not kings, but we call them wise men, but what does that even mean? Are they simply elders? Just folks that have gained a lot of knowledge because of their experience? Well, if that's the case, why not just call them elders? Are they scholars? Are they wise men because they're scholars? Maybe. But be honest for a second. When you envision a scholar, what's that mental image that comes to mind? I'm guessing at least a few of you, it's something akin to some old white dude with frizzy hair, like face buried in a book. Right? The type of person that has zero common sense. That probably doesn't even know how to buy milk or change a tire. Right? Some sort of egghead that has zero common sense. Well, and maybe that does track, because the story that we get of these supposed wise men kind of have that egg-headed, lack of common sense moment, because they go to, who do they ask where to find the baby Jesus? Who do they ask? Herod. And what do we know about Herod? Well, Herod the Great, more like the great and terrible ruler, not of Oz, but of Judah, right? Herod the Great, who was crowned by none other than the man who would become Caesar Augustus, with an actual little crown, given the title King of the Jews. They went to that guy, the guy that killed not just his enemies, but eventually a whole bunch of his family because he thought they threatened him. That's the guy they went to and said, hey, do you know where we can find the next King of the Jews? Not a lot of common sense there. So maybe that sort of egg-headed scholar vision works a little bit. Or maybe, could they really be that guileless? But if they were, if they're that sort of guileless egghead type scholar, would they have been able to, as the song says, traverse afar? And to do so over such varying terrain as, what do we have? Field and fountain and moor and mountain. How many scholars do you know can do that? Look, to be fair, the actual scholars that I know at least are good and kind people of faith who are committed to connecting the academy to the church and want all the scholars that I know personally, they want you and me and us to be curious and to take seriously the way we talk about God, especially the way we talk about the God we meet in Jesus. Still, I gotta say, somehow, we three scholars of Orient, that just doesn't really quite work, does it? Not sure that helps. Now, our author Phillips, she says at one part in this chapter about the curious people that are these wise men, these kings, she says, well, maybe it's a term that means fire priest. Now that's a pretty cool name, and I wouldn't reject that. I have no idea what it means. Like, is it some circus performer with, the fire on the ends of the stick, and they're doing some kind of cool juggling thing? Are Are those the guys that like eat the fire in the circus? What does it mean to be a fire priest? I have actually no idea. You do you go down, the flame goes higher, burning in a ring of fire. I don't know really what that means. Are they walking on hot coals? How does that help? I don't understand how that helps us. So I'm going to move on by. How about the text? The text of the Gospel according to Matthew. Do you remember what we read? What did we just read? What word does the text use? Magi. That's right. Now, I'm embarrassed to say, it was not until, I've been hearing this for 52 years, and it was not until this week that it occurred to me that magi is simply the plural form of magus. Now that's a term we know, isn't it? What's a magus? Well, it's a mage. It's a magician. Oh. So, are these guys just, experts at sleight of hand? Does that help us? Well, I don't know. Maybe Mary and Joseph are those kind of parents who are like, nothing but the best for our boy, and they sent for him to do tricks at a birthday party? Does that fit? Does that help us? I'm not really sure how that helps. What else can magus mean? Well, it means charmer, or conjurer, or witch. Oh boy. Now we're talking scapegoats, right? Over the years, almost exclusively, tiny and weak and scared men have used the term witch to impugn impugn women that they're scared of, right? That they accuse them all sorts of evil, usually to cover their own inadequacies. And of course, the Hebrew Scriptures warn us of dealing with witches, and yet, there's a really pretty great story in the Hebrew Testament, what we call the Hebrew Scriptures, what we call the Old Testament, of a witch who's even more faithful to the ways of God than the king of Israel at the time. But that's a story for another day. We'll come back to that one sometime. Can add it to the list, the growing list of stories that we're going to come back to. So magus can also mean wizard, voodooist. Ooh, yikes. Now we're talking about somebody like, Dr. Facilier, the Shadow Man, the villain in the Disney show, The Princess and the Frog. It's a really good movie if you like, but that guy's creepy. I don't want that guy anywhere near baby Jesus. All right, so what else can magus mean? Enchanter, sorcerer. Now you know what we're talking about. We're talking about sorcerer. We're talking about enchanter. Now we're talking about Jafar. We're talking about the villain from Disney's Aladdin. That's the picture. Do you want either of those guys anywhere near the baby Jesus? No, I don't either. And that's the term we get. Magi. The footnote in the New Revised Standard even says sorcerer. And yet, whatever term we land on, whichever one of those grabs you, it seems pretty clear that these are folks who are outsiders. Do you hear the capital O in that? Outsiders. Enemies, even. And especially given what the Hebrew Scriptures, what we call the Old Testament, tells us about dealing with conjurers and sorcerers and witches, these folks are not just outsiders, but enemy. And yet, here they are, being even more faithful to the ways of God than the king of Jews, Herod. Even more faithful these outsiders, these enemies are, than the religious leaders at the time. Even more faithful, even to the ways of God, these outsiders and enemies are, than to the religious scholars of the day. Friends, if we will let it, I believe this most familiar of stories still has visions to show us, still has lessons to teach us. We can learn still from it about who God is. Visions about who we are and who we are called to be. If Advent is a time of waiting for the birth of God and the baby Jesus, well, I feel like that's an easy and obvious connection to us, isn't it? As a congregation, we are still awaiting a new birth of sorts in our Ridge Road building. So what's the latest on that? Well, there was an inspection on Thursday, and the chairlift that makes us ADA compliant has passed. We also know that the sprinkler system people were working all day preparing to test that system, and it's not an easy test. It has to be pressure tested and hold pressure for a specified period of time. We know that the Village of Manuka inspectors want us to get in that building, want us to have occupancy. We also know they have to follow the rules. They have to follow the law so that that is a place where each and every person who steps foot is safe. And so in the inspection, they determined that a sprinkler head needs to be added in the electrical circuit breaker closet. Now, I hesitate to say this next part given our history, but we're going to step out in faith and say the required changes and the re-inspection are scheduled to happen this week. I'm pretty sure the operative word in that sentence is scheduled. Ridge Road is coming. It's happening. It's just like most births. We don't know exactly when. But friends, if we let it, this familiar story of travelers from afar, this story of Magi bringing gifts for Jesus can teach us to be ready for those we might deem outsiders at Ridge Road. Because people will come and check us out. You know, from all the conversations you've had around town, people are curious. When are you going to be in that building? When are you going to be in that building? How many times in 6 months have I heard you say, people are constantly asking you, when's that building going to be open? You keep having to say sheepishly, I don't know. Soon, we hope. People will come. Oh yes, people will come. And we have to be ready to treat them like the found family that we've created here. This most familiar story can show us a vision of how to do that. We need to be, I think, bold like these Magi, setting a course for faithfulness in our context and sticking to it. We boldly proclaim that we are and will continue to be inclusive of all of our neighbors, especially our LGBTQ neighbors, whom some in our country want to pretend aren't fully human. That will not happen in our place. We need to be curious people like these Magi, caring about those we encounter, listening to them, learning their stories. Friends, too many folks over the years have turned away from some church because they felt used by it. You know how we begin to counter that? By listening, by being curious about folks that aren't yet part of our found family. We need to be guileless like the Magi as we invite friends and neighbors and strangers to give our community a try. If we believe we have something worthy of sharing, some angle on who God is, some understanding of who Jesus calls us to be, and I believe that we do have that, then all we have to do is invite other folks to be part of it. We can see this vision, the power of giving gifts like the Magi. Friends, I don't have to tell you, your financial support now helps us be well prepared to get that new start at Ridge Road. This story, as curious as it is, as weird as it is, as unknowable as parts of it are, can show us the vision of the world as it can be, as God intends it to be. A world where outsiders who are hurting are offered comfort and care, where the offer of community is truly open to all our neighbors. Came across a story that poet Naomi Shahid Nai tells about her experience at an airport. She writes, I was wandering around the Albuquerque airport when I heard an announcement.
If anyone in the vicinity of gate A4 understands Arabic, please come to the gate immediately.
Well, she writes, one pauses. And yet gate A4 was my own gate. I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian embroidered dress, just like my grandma, was crumpled on the floor, wailing loudly. Help, said the flight service attendant. Talk to her. We told her the flight was going to be late, and she did this. The poet writes, I stopped and put my arms around her and spoke to her haltingly in her native tongue. The minute she heard any word she knew, however poorly used, she stopped crying. She thought the flight had been canceled entirely, and she needed to get where we were going for major medical treatment. So I said, no, we're fine. You'll get there, just later. Who's picking you up? Let's call her. So we called her son, and I spoke with him in English, and I told him I would stay with his mother, that I would ride next to her, and she talked to him. And then we called our other sons, just for the fun of it. And then we called my dad, and he and she spoke for a while in Arabic, and they, of course, found some common people in the friends that they shared. And then I thought, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? This all took up about 2 hours. She was laughing a lot by then, telling about her life, patting my knee, answering questions. She pulled a sack of homemade Mamul cookies, little powdered sugar, crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts, out of her bag, and was offering them to all the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman rejected a cookie. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina took one, the mom from California took one, the lovely woman from Laredo took one. We were all covered by the same powdered sugar. And smiling. There's no better cookie than that. And then because the delay was so long, the airline started handing out free beverages, and 2 little girls who were also on our flight ran around helping serve everyone these beverages, and they were too filled and covered with this powdered sugar from the cookies they were all enjoying. And I noticed my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag. Some medicinal thing with green furry leaves, such an old country traveling tradition. Always carry a plant, always stay rooted to somewhere. And I looked around at that gate of late and weary travelers, and thought, this is the world I want to live in. The shared world. Not a single person in that gate, once the crying and confusion had stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person there. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all the women. And it occurred to me, this is the world I want to live in, that this can still happen, that not everything is lost. Friends, I believe another world is possible. Not only is it possible, we can see it from here. Another world full of justice, full of hope, is possible when we treat those we don't yet know like people born in the image of God, because that's exactly who they are. Another world is possible. We live into this incredible story of Advent and Christmas. This incredible story we've been given. This amazing story that tells us we're included. That goes out of its way to say everybody's part of this story. It tells us we've got gifts to share. another world is possible when we allow this ceaselessly intriguing story to empower us to be curious people about our neighbors and invite them along for the journey. Together, with the power of God's Spirit, we can bring that dream to life. Amen.
Amen.